Okay, great. Uh, Let me turn on the laser pointer. Just yeah. Okay, good evening, all of you. Welcome to another live problem solving session for the course Introduction to Semiconductor Devices, which is being conducted by Professor Naresh Kumar Imani from IIT Hyderabad. Just to introduce myself again, I am Soham Lakhote, currently a fourth year PhD student at IIC Bangalore, and my research area is in the field of analog and RF circuits and systems. Correct. So now again, just for the formality, we will take a short break in between the session. The break may not be of 10 minutes because we have a lot of content to cover today, right? And just for a standard disclaimer, the diagrams which are not referenced in this particular PPT have all been taken from the Donald Nieman book, and rest of that, and wherever I am using diagrams from some other source, I have cited that source. Okay. And just to I hope everyone is able to access the recordings as well as the lecture notes. So this is the YouTube channel where all the lectures are being uploaded regularly, and in the description section of that video you will be able to see the link to the presentation folder where you will be able to access all the lecture notes. Okay, so now this lecture is going to be interesting because for this particular week we studied one transistor structure, right? That is the MOSFET. So now the format for this particular lecture will be a little bit different. So what I have done over here, I have listed all the important interview questions that will be asked based on the topic of the MOSFET. So it doesn't matter whether you are trying to go into the MTech or PhD, trying to take admission into ISCs or IITs, or whether you are trying to enter into the industry. So these are some of the common questions that those people ask, and it is my responsibility to at least give you some hint to solve this kind of questions so that you won't face any trouble during the interview. So what we will do, we will cover few concepts first. In between, we will solve some problems, and we will see whether we have covered these questions while discussing the concepts or not. Okay. So now let's start with the MOSFET, right? So we studied about the MOSFET. Let me just turn on the pen. Yeah, so we studied about the MOSFET. So what is so different about the MOSFET? So in the last section we had studied something called as the MOSCAP, right? And if you compare the structure, okay, somebody wants to join. Yeah, so if you want to compare the structure of the MOSCAP with the MOSFET, then what you will see, if you, okay, just a minute. Yeah, so if you just take this structure, right? If you just take this structure and remove the source and drain terminals that you are seeing in the figure, then this is your standard MOSFET structure. And what did we say when we were studying the MOSFET? We said that we will first understand the entire physics, entire semiconductor physics equation, energy band diagram of this structure first, and once we have been able to understand, quantified the whatever equations we wanted, then we will move on to the MOSFET to study the, what you can say, the equations and as well as the semiconductor physics of this particular transistor structure. Correct. So now what have we done over here? So first of all, what is the job of the transistor? So we have different terminals. We have source, we have gate, as well as we have drain. Correct. Now what I want, so the basic job of the transistor is nothing but to control the current between the two terminals. I'll just write it at the bottom, to control the current between two terminals using another terminal, that is using third terminal. So this is the main job of the transistor. So now what we have done over here, so how this is happening over here, this is my source, this is my drain. You know that current flows between this source and drain, correct? And that magnitude of that current will be controlled by applying the gate voltage. So that's why we have three different terminals that are present: source, gate and drain. Just ignore the body terminal as of now because it has been grounded, correct? So now what we want the electrons, we want some current to be flowing in this transistor, correct? So if you have understood the MOSFET clearly, then you know that there are different regions: accumulation, depletion and the inversion region, correct? So we first form the channel by making sure that my MOSFET is operating under the inversion mode of operation. So you will have a channel just below this gate oxide, correct? This is your SiO2, just below the gate oxide. And now to make sure that there is a current flowing, you have to apply a voltage across these two terminals, so that whatever channel, that is whatever electrons you have formed just below this gate oxide, they will be able to flow between these two terminals. Correct? So I hope that is very much clear how this MOSFET is working and why we have three terminals over here. This is the basic characteristics of any transistor, that the current should be controlled by another terminal, or else what it will become like. So if I just have two terminals A and B, correct, and if I tell you that by applying VAB, correct, by changing the VAB, I can change this current I, correct. So by applying VAB, I can change this current I. This is nothing but a simple resistor, right, from the Ohm's law. This is A, this is B. So if you change the potential difference across the resistor, then you will get the current, correct? So there is no point in reinventing the same thing. We want something different. We want something different, that is the current between the two terminals should be controlled by a different terminal. And that is a function of the transistor, correct? So now let's try to deduce this structure even more, correct? So first of all, I will just ask you one question. Let me just change the color so that it won't become a mess. Yeah, green color. So now if you just observe this, correct, so now, and if you just observe this over here, what you are seeing, that without even applying any voltage, there is already some depletion region that has been created, correct. There is already some depletion region. See, you are seeing this is the depletion region that has been created. Over here also some depletion region has been created, correct. So now first of all, just tell me the reason why there is a depletion region over here. I haven't done anything. Just look at this area, you will directly get the answer. Why there is a depletion region over there? Is there any structure you are able to see over here? There is a N plus that is present. What is there over here? See, why the depletion region should form? Just see, there is already one N plus over here. What do I need to form a depletion region? Just observe here, what is this? This is your substrate, right? And what is the type of doping in the substrate? Guys, I won't be able to move ahead. Please answer. We have a lot of content to cover. What is the type of substrate? Just tell me. What is the type of substrate over here? Is it N? Is it P? Is it N plus? What is the type of substrate? The doping. P type, right? So we have N plus over here, we have P over here, correct? So what is this? What have we formed? Can you see certain resemblance with any of the thing that you have studied in the past few weeks? What is this? PN junction, right? So you know that even without applying any bias, some depletion region will already be formed, and the extent of the depletion will be higher on that particular side whose doping is less, correct. We have doped this region heavily, N plus, correct, but this is lightly doped, correct. This region is lightly doped, so that is why you are seeing most of the depletion is present at the outside of this N plus. So that means if I just write, the depletion is present like this. Just see in this entire region, you are within this N plus, you are not able to see any depletion region. All the depletion has been formed outside this N plus. Similarly on this side also, correct. This is the reason why we have a depletion outside this N plus region and not into the N plus, correct. So one more thing now, when you apply plus voltage, some positive voltage plus VDS over here, so what you are doing, you are applying a positive voltage on this side, correct, and this side the substrate is already grounded with the source over here, correct. So that means this P side is grounded. I am applying a positive voltage to this N plus. Can you please tell me what will happen to the depletion region, whether it will increase or decrease? I am applying a positive voltage on N plus side. This is reverse bias or this is forward bias for this PN junction? Okay, depletion region should decrease. Can you please tell me why? Does depletion region decreases in the forward bias case or the reverse bias case? Yeah, it should increase. Very good. So the depletion rate should increase because I am applying a positive voltage on the N side. Correct. So this is a clear-cut case of the reverse bias. In the reverse bias, the depletion region increases, right? So that's why you will always see that whenever you have applied some kind of even small positive voltage, the extent of this depletion, right? The extent of this depletion near the drain side will be always higher than the extent of depletion on the source side. Correct. So that's why you are seeing this bulk is higher, and the reason I just gave you. Correct. The junction is highly reverse biased compared to the PN junction at the source body junction, right? So this is highly reverse biased even compared to this, because source is grounded, the body is also grounded over here, but here you are applying some positive voltage. Correct. So I hope till this point it is very much clear. Correct. So now let's move on to the next concept. So what we did, so we won't be doing any derivations over here. You can go to the lecture materials because it will take a lot of time, and sir has given a lot of time to go into these derivations, right? So we will just understand what this stuff is. So we saw two conditions, right? We said that MOSFET operates in the three modes. So one is cutoff, one is linear, and one is what? Saturation. Correct. So the cutoff means you don't apply anything, so that means your VGS is always less than VT. Correct. So linear case means your VGS is greater than the threshold voltage, but the drain to source voltage, right, where the current is flowing, so the voltage that you are applying, it is less than VGS minus VT. We will come to these conditions, okay? Don't worry, we will also understand how this stuff is happening. For the saturation case, what did we say? VGS should be greater than VT, but even my VDS should be higher than VGS minus VT. And in many books, you will see that this term will be denoted as VD sat. Correct? This represents the saturation overdrive, that is VGS minus VT. Correct? So now, so if we try to draw this line, that is VDS is equal to VGS minus VT, right? You will see that it will come out to be something like a parabolic kind of graph. Correct? And this region, which is on the right side of this graph, correct? This is where my MOSFET is operating in the saturation region. And why did I say that? Just look, ID is constant with respect to VDS. Correct? So that means what? Dou ID by dou VDS. What should be this value, guys? ID is constant with respect to VDS. So if I just differentiate this line, what will happen? Will I get anything? Or it will be just 0? For this right side I am talking about. If I take dou ID by dou VDS, what will be the value? Does this line have any slope? Does this line have any slope?
No slope, sir.
No slope, right? So dou ID by dou VDS will be 0 over here. Correct? And that is the same thing that you are seeing over here. There is no dependence of ID on VDS. It is only dependent on VGS minus VT. And this is what I was saying you, that the current through the two terminals is controlled by the voltage that I am applying at the third terminal. So never forget this statement, okay? Or else you will just get a resistor if you don't have this kind of functionality. Correct? Whereas on this side of the curve, let me just change the color of my pen. Pointer option, great. So if I just look at this side of the curve, correct? This side of the curve, then you will get this sort of equation. And how this equation was derived? you just have to substitute VDS is equal to VGS minus VT in this equation. You will automatically get the equation number 1 from equation number 2. Over here, what you are seeing is that the current ID is not only dependent on the other terminal, but it is also dependent on the VDS also over here. Correct? So what you are seeing is that if I have two terminals A and B, so the current bit that is flowing between these two terminals, correct? So the current that is flowing between these two terminals is also dependent on the voltage that I am applying between the two terminals. And you know that this behavior is represented by what? This is represented by a simple resistor from the Ohm's law. So that's why you must have seen that sir must have told you that in the linear region for small VDS values, correct? So for small VDS, your MOSFET actually behaves as a resistor. It actually behaves as a resistor, and this is the terminal, and this is how we can think about it. Other way to think about it is for small VDS values, I can make this VDS square as 0. I can ignore it, correct? So now this ID is what you can say some constant, that is mu n C ox W by L upon 2 into 2 times VGS minus VT into VDS. So this ID and VDS, so there is some relation between it, correct? So if I just go to the okay, we don't have a space. So what you can do over here, there is some ID is equal to some, let's say, constant time VDS over here, correct? So now if from the Ohm's law, if I do what? VDS upon ID, I should get a resistance, right? And this is what? 1 upon beta, correct? 1 upon beta. So now if you just take this term, right? If you just calculate this 1 upon beta, then you will get 1 upon beta as what? 1 upon mu n C ox W by L VGS minus VTH. So this is the value of resistance that the MOSFET will present to you if you operate the MOSFET in the linear region. And that's why the sir must have told you that this behaves as a resistor, and the value of resistance can be found out using this particular formula. Okay, I hope till this point it is very much clear. So now one interesting question that even I had when I was in the BTech, right? So okay, you told me about the regions cutoff, linear, as well as the cutoff, linear, as well as the saturation. But there is one interesting thing that happens. So first of all, sir has derived this, right? This channel charge is proportional to what? VGS minus VT minus Vx. So what is this? So Vx is nothing but you have to go in this direction, correct? At source, my voltage is 0 because it is grounded. At drain side, my voltage is what? VDS. So now if I move from, let's say this is x equal to 0, let's say this is x equal to L, correct? L is the channel length of the MOSFET, correct? So if I move, for example, if I move it like this, Vx x equal to 0 and then Vx at x equal to L, correct? Then this is 0 and this is what? This is VDS, correct? So now what you can see over here, the channel, the potential of the channel, this Vx is nothing but the potential of this channel, correct? So now this potential varies from 0 to VDS value as I move my x from 0 to L. I will just repeat it once again. As I move from x equal to 0 to x equal to L, my potential in the channel changes from 0 to VDS. Correct? Now what is the consequence of this phenomenon? Correct? So normally we should have drawn the channel like this. This is completely flat, exactly uniform channel. Correct? This is nothing but your rectangle, perfect rectangle. But what you are seeing over here, for this particular case, this rectangle is not perfect. This is looking something like this, correct? It is looking something like this. This channel is slowly terminating, correct? And at one point what will happen, this channel that you are seeing over here, its shape will look something like this. That is, there is no channel in this particular region, correct? So what is actually happening and why we are getting some weird phenomena like this? So it is nothing new. This channel is nothing but your inversion layer, correct? Inversion layer consists of a lot of electrons, right? These are the minority carriers in the p-type substrate, correct? So now what we have written over here, the channel charge is proportional to VGS minus VT minus Vx, correct? So if I don't change Vg, correct? If I don't change Vg, let's say Vg is constant, my Vs is 0, correct? So now, and what I am trying to do, this VDS that you are seeing over here, slowly I am increasing. Correct? So slowly I am increasing. So now what will happen? You know that this VDS is nothing but the value of Vx. Just a minute, somebody wants to join. Yeah. So this VDS is nothing but this is the VDS that I have. Correct? So now if I increase the VDS a little bit, this term Vx that you are seeing over here, it will increase. It will increase where? It will increase near this region, as you go, correct? Because what is happening, you are increasing the VDS, and what did I tell you? The potential of the channel changes from 0 to VDS. So if I take the value of VDS as 1 volt, correct, then this potential in the channel will increase from 0 to 1 volt. Near here you will get some value like 0.9. Over here you will get the channel potential maybe something like 0.2. Correct? Now if I increase the value of this 1 volt to 2 volt, what will happen? This 0.2 that you are seeing over here, it may become 0.4, and this 0.9 that you are seeing over here, it may become 1.8. So what has happened, at each and every point in the channel, the potential of the channel has actually increased. Correct? Now if my Vx value starts to increase, then the channel charge, according to this equation, sir has already derived this equation, please go through the lecture material once. If the value of the Vx increases, then this entire term that you are seeing over here, this entire term will actually decrease. Correct? This entire term will actually decrease, and since the channel charge, this is nothing but the inversion layer charge. Correct? Inversion layer charge. So if this decreases, that means what? The number of free carriers, the number of minority electrons that will be present at that particular point, they will start to decrease. Correct? Why you are not seeing this tapering? See, this is nothing but a tapering kind of phenomenon. Correct? Why you are not seeing this tapering at this end? Because at this end my Vx is 0. At this end my Vx is 0 because source has been grounded. Correct? You will only see this phenomena over here in between this particular part. Correct? The more you increase the value of VDX, the more the Vx increases, and more the Vx increases, the channel charge reduces proportionally. At one point you will hit a point where this entire term becomes 0. Correct? What is the point? When the Vx reaches VGS minus VT. Correct? And how did I how I have defined it? So Vx at x equal to L is nothing but my VDS. Correct? If this value reaches VGS minus VTH, then what will happen? At the drain point, at this particular drain end, my channel charge reduces to 0. And that is why you are seeing there is no channel that is present over here. Correct? Now a famous interview question that will be asked many a times just to fool you when you go for the interviews in IIT, ISC or any industry, right? So let me just change the color of the pen. So the question that those guys will ask is, if there is no channel that is present in this region, correct? There is no channel that is present, then how the current is flowing? Correct? Then how the current is flowing? Correct? So one thing that you should never forget, is that even though my channel has become something like this, correct? Even though my channel has become something like this, there exists a depletion region over here. Are you able to see? Just let me just change the color of the pen. There exists a depletion region. See, you kept on increasing the VDS, right? You kept on increasing the VDS till channel charge reduced to 0. Became 0 at drain terminal. Correct? But one consequence of increasing this VDS is that you are making this junction, right? You are making this junction more and more reverse bias. So the depletion region will also increase over here. Correct? The depletion region will increase, and note that even though there does not exist a channel in this particular length x, there is a strong electric field that is present in this region. Correct? So whatever electrons are reaching to this particular point, they will be pulled away by this electric field, and the direction of this electric field is in this direction. Correct? The direction of this electric field is in this direction, and all those electrons will be pulled away. correct? So even though there does not exist channel, there exists a strong electric field which will be pulling out this electron from the end of this channel towards the drain terminal, and that's how the current still flows, right? So it does not mean that when the channel reduces to zero at a particular point, there will be a no flow of electron. Do not forget that when even though the channel is reducing, the channel charge is reducing, at the same time your depletion region is expanding, and depletion region will expand like this, correct? It is not a horizontal, it is a region which will become like this. If you increase even more, it will become something like this, correct? It will keep on increasing. So do not forget this effect, that the depletion region will increase and your electric field has become so strong in this depletion region that all the electrons will be pulled away. Correct? I hope it is very much clear. So this has been taken from the Donald Niemann. You can read this explanation when I will be uploading the lecture notes. Okay. So just to summarize, so the VD-SAT is defined as nothing but your VGS minus VT. This is the voltage at which your channel reduces to zero. We do not have any channel at the drain terminal. So that's why it has been defined as the saturation point. Correct? And when the value of the VDS is greater than VGS minus VT, and when VGS is greater than VT, you are operating in the saturation region. And when VGS is greater than VT, but your VDS is less than VGS minus VT, you are operating in the linear region. Now, why these two regions are so important? So always note that when you are operating the MOSFET in the saturation region, correct, it is always used for the amplification case. When you want to design any amplifier, any analog amplifier, or you want to design power amplifier or low noise amplifier, correct, which are the RF front ends in your circuit, so you always operate the MOSFET in the saturation region, correct? And when you want to design it as a switch or as a resistor, voltage controlled resistor, then you operate it in the linear region. Correct? In the next lecture, we will also see the reason for that. Okay? Because sir has barely touched on the concept of the transconductance and all. So I don't want to confuse you a lot. So in the next lecture, we will see the reason for this. Like why we always operate the MOSFET in the saturation region when we want to use it as an amplifier. Correct? And do not forget these equations. Correct? So when you are trying to solve any question, they won't give you any condition. They will just give you values of VDS and VGS, and they will ask you determine the value of current or determine the value of the transconductance GM. Correct? So what is the value of GM? GM is nothing but your dou ID by dou VGS. Correct? So if you differentiate this equation with respect to VGS, the equation that you will get is nothing but the transconductance. Correct? And why did we call this as a transconductance? So we call this as a transconductance because the voltage at the third terminal is actually causing a change in the current that is flowing between the first two terminals. I will just repeat it once again. The voltage that I am actually changing at the third terminal, that is the gate, it is actually controlling the current which is flowing between the other two terminals, that is source and drain. That is why there is a term called as a trans, right? Term called as a trans. Trans means nothing but the change in the voltage at other terminal is causing the change in the current flowing between the two other terminals. Okay, so do not forget these equations, and do not forget that you always have to check these conditions before using any of this equation, or your answer will come out to be wrong. Okay, so I hope till this point it is very much clear. So now let's look at some of the interesting interview questions that those people ask. Correct? So the first question we have is why source and drain regions are heavily doped. So we will move on to the diagram that we had. Okay, let's have this diagram only. Correct? So why these regions have been doped heavily? Correct? So the first thing that comes in our mind is that okay, we have to give some kind of metallic contact. Correct? We have to give some kind of metallic contact to the source and drain region. Correct? Because we want the terminals of the MOSFET to be at the user's control. We will be applying some voltages over there. Correct? So we have to give some kind of metallic contact. And to make sure that the contact, right, you have studied two type of contacts for the metal semiconductor junction. One is what you call as ohmic, and one is what you call as a Schottky. Correct? Now I will just ask you a simple question. If you want to form a contact between, if you want to make sure that I want to give this N plus region as a metallic contact, correct? Then whether the contact should be ohmic or it should be Schottky. Note that I don't want to form a diode over here. I want to make sure that there is a as less drop as possible between this metal semiconductor junction, so that whatever source voltage or whatever drain voltage I apply at the metal, the same voltage will reach to this N plus region. I don't want to form any kind of diode over here. So what should be the nature of contact? Ohmic or Schottky? Ohmic, very good. So we want to form the ohmic contact, correct? And all of you know that if I form a contact between N-type semiconductor and the metal, correct? N-type semiconductor and the metal, and if I form a contact like N plus type semiconductor and the metal, all of you know that this contact is much more reliable and there will be less drop when I apply some voltage on the metal. There will be the voltage drop. If I apply 1 volt over here, hardly some voltage will get dropped over here, and at least I will reach something like 0.9 to 0.95 volt over here. Whereas in the same case, if I apply 1 volt over here, right, this voltage may be reaching something like 0.8 volt or something like this. I'm just giving a rough example. Don't take it very seriously. This is just to clarify the concept. Correct. The another way to imagine this, if I make this doping even heavy, correct. Let's say this is 10 to the power 17. If I make it like 10 to the power 19 or 10 to the power 20, then this material will not act like a semiconductor anymore. It will act like a metal. Correct. The more I increase the doping, the more this material acts like a metal, and more this material acts like a metal, the smaller will be the voltage drop when I give certain voltage to this metal contact over here. Correct. This is one way to think about it. So that is one of the main reasons why we have a N plus regions over here. Another reason is, okay, we have formed some kind of channel over here, correct, and we want this region to source us the electrons, correct. This is N plus, correct. There are a lot of free electrons that are present. So when the channel connects these two regions, right, when there are abundant of electrons that are present, that means what, this source region N plus and this drain region N plus, it has been shorted with the channel, correct. There is a conduction layer that has been now introduced, because you are operating the MOSFET in the inversion mode of operation, correct. You are operating it under the inversion mode. You can consider as a MOSFET or you can consider as MOSCAP also, correct. So that means what, this is acting like a short over here, and I want this short to be as good as possible, correct, to make sure that these regions have to be doped as a N plus, correct, because only then this entire region will act like a good conductor. Correct. So this is one of the, so these are the primary reasons why we generally dope source and drain regions heavily. Correct. Now the next question that comes up in our mind is why the substrate is lightly doped. Correct. So I will just give you an intuition. Just give me a second. Okay, we will draw some diagram over here only. Just a minute. Yeah. So I have N plus. I have N plus. Correct. Then what I have a gate oxide. Then I have a gate over here. This is gate, this is drain, this is source, right? And this is p-type substrate, correct? And this is my body. Now what did we say? Why are we doping this slightly? Correct? So let's try to understand this stuff. So now this is, you know that this is an NMOS structure. This is my NMOS structure, correct? And how we achieved the inversion? First, we entered from Vg is equal to 0 to some Vg is equal to some small positive value, correct? Then we went on to case where Vg became exactly at the threshold voltage point. So first of all, we formed a depletion region, and then we went on to the inversion mode, correct? So now, just a simple question. I have to apply enough gate voltage over here so that all the majority carriers, who are the majority carriers over here, they are nothing but the holes, because the substrate is p-type, correct? Because the substrate is p-type, so they are holes. So now what I have to make sure that to make this region depleted of any free carriers, I have to apply sufficient positive small voltage so that all these holes are repelled away from this semiconductor oxide interface, correct? All these holes will be repelled away, correct? Now a very simple question, if I make this p type to p plus type, correct, what will happen? What will happen to the number of holes that are present near this semiconductor oxide interface? They will increase or they will decrease in they will increase or they will decrease. Let's say this is 10 to the power 15 per centimeter cube. Let's say I increased it to 10 to the power 16 per centimeter cube. So if I take a 1 centimeter cube of area, by the way, this is a very huge area. Just don't take an area like that. I'm just giving an example. Then I initially had 10 to the power 15 holes. Now, since I increase it to p plus type, I have 10 to the power 16 holes now. So my number of holes, if I take a cube of 1 centimeter cube area, right, then my holes have increased by 10x. So the number of holes has increased over here. Now if I want to repel all the 10x increase in the holes away from the semiconductor oxide interface, do I have to apply more positive gate voltage or less positive gate voltage?
More positive voltage.
More positive voltage, right? So that means what the effort required to pull these, to pull away, sorry, to push away these holes from the oxide semiconductor interface is more, correct? So this actually makes the phenomena that your threshold voltage will increase. Why did this happen? Because to make this area completely depleted, now you want higher voltage, because the increase, the 10x increase in the holes has to be accommodated by increasing the gate voltage. Only then this increase in the holes will be pushed away from the oxide semiconductor interface. So your threshold voltage actually increased. Correct? You don't want this to happen because you want to scale your MOSFET to as low technology nodes as possible. Currently TSMC is working at 3 nanometer, 5 nanometer technologies. Correct? You want to make sure that even your threshold voltage decreases a little bit. It should not happen that supply voltage has reached 0.8 volt and your threshold voltage is 0.6 or 0.7 volt. There is no point in having a MOSFET which is operating at a supply voltage of 0.8 volts and whose threshold voltage is 0.6 to 0.7. Okay. On the other hand, if you make this threshold voltage too less, there will be a solid leakage current that will be present, and you don't want that because your battery of your mobile will start to drain heavily. Correct? So this is one main reason. Another reason, this was one of the reason. Now I will come to the main reason. Okay. Now if you increase, see, all of you have studied the concept of the mobility. Correct? If my electron wants to go from this point to this point, correct? Now what is this material? This is p type. So what are the p type dopants? So what are the p type impurities? So we have a boron atoms, correct? A lot of boron atoms. So now if this electron has to travel from this point A to this point B, what it will do, even though I may have applied electric field and all, it may go and hit the atom, then again it will hit somewhere, then again it will hit somewhere, it will go to this path. If I decrease the doping, right? If I decrease the doping, what will happen? So between point A and point B, if this electron wants to move between these points, now I only have one boron atom over here. What will happen maximally? So it can go, it can hit over here, and then it can reach to this point. So the number of obstacles that this electron will encounter, correct? It is more when your doping is higher. Now what are the consequences of this? So when this electron tries to accelerate, correct? When this electron tries to accelerate, it immediately hits its impurity atom, correct? That is your boron atom. So again, after hitting, if it tries to accelerate, again immediately it will hit the another boron atom, correct? So these collisions will be avoided if you decrease your doping, correct? So these collisions will be avoided if you decrease your doping. So in short, the mobility, correct? The mobility will be good. The mobility will be higher when your doping is smaller, correct? And why does this mobility matter so much? This mobility matters so much because you have seen this expression, the transconductance, right? What is this? Mu n Cox W by L VGS minus VTH. You will see that the gain of the MOSFET depends on this GM. You will see that, or in the next lecture I will show you some examples. The gain of the MOSFET depends on the GM. Now the gain can be higher if you are able to improve mobility somehow, correct? You want to get the best mobility possible. Now if I am applying some high frequency signal at the gate of the MOSFET, that is your AC signal is there. I want the current to react immediately to this AC signal. And if I want my electrons that are present in the channel to react very quickly to this high frequency signal, correct? There should be as less obstacles possible for the electron in this particular inversion layer, and to that to happen my doping has to be reduced. That is the one of the main reason why we never have P plus type region over here, why we always have P minus type region. This is a lightly doped region. Okay, I hope this answer to this second question is also clear to you. If you guys have any doubts, please feel free to poke me at any point. So we are done with this question. We are done with this question. Now this question we have already covered, right? How the current flows if the channel does not exist near the drain after the pinch off condition. So the pinch off condition is nothing but VDS is equal to VGS minus VT. Correct? I have shown you one diagram. See, this is the diagram that I was talking about. In this region, there does not exist any channel, but we have seen that as you increase the VDS, the depletion region will also keep on increasing, and the electric field that is present in this depletion region will be so strong that any electrons that are present near the end of this channel, all of them will be pulled away by this electric field. Correct? We have already seen this, right? I have already explained this. Now, the next question also we have already discussed, correct? And some of you guys have helped me to solve this question. So why the depletion region on the drain side is always higher than the source side when the MOSFET is conducting in the linear or saturation region, correct? So what did we see? Just a minute, there is a complete mess. Yeah. So what did we see over here? Let me see if I can pull out some diagram. Okay, let me just draw the diagram. It is not making any sense here. So if I have N plus, right? This is my oxide, and then this is my gate that I have. Correct? What did we see? We have some depletion region over here. I'm just highlighting like this. And I have some depletion region like this. Correct? The depletion region is always bigger over here. The reason is because the source is always grounded. Correct? Vs is equal to 0 and Vds is some positive value. So after applying some positive value, since this is a P type, right? If you keep on increasing this positive value, the junction, this P N plus junction will become more and more reverse bias, and that's why the depletion region will keep on increasing in this particular part. Correct? So that is the reason why in many textbooks and in many papers you will see that the depletion on the drain side is always higher compared to the depletion on the source side. So even we have covered this type of question. Now one more interesting question that even one of my colleagues was asked in the PhD admission interviews, right? How is the contact made to the body? So this is the P type that I have. Correct? This is the P type that I have. Now what can I do? I will just ask you this simple question. Again, I want to have some kind of metallic contact over here. Correct? I want to have some kind of metallic contact. Right? So this is a metallic contact that I want. Now this is one arrangement, and another arrangement I will show you. Okay? Just tell me which one is better. This is N plus. This is N plus. Or maybe some depletion region over here. Very small depletion region over here. Then I have a gate. No, sorry, not gate. I have some oxide. Then I have a gate material. Correct? Now this is a P type. Correct? Now what I do to make a contact, what I do over here is I introduce a P plus. I introduce a P plus kind of doping over here, and then I take a metallic contact. Correct? This is case A. This is case B. What is the point of having this metal semiconductor junction? What is our target? So our target is what? Very less drop across metal semiconductor junction. This is our target, correct? So now what I have done over here, I have introduced the island of P plus kind of doping, and then I took a metallic contact. Over here I didn't do anything. I just had this P type and directly I took a metallic contact over here. Can any one of you please tell me which of these cases, case B and case A, will form a good ohmic contact? Case A or case B?
Case A.
Case A, very good. So the analogy I have already given, right? So this P plus, let's say this is 10 to the power 17. If I make it 10 to the power 19 or 10 to the power 20, then this island will become more like, it will behave more like a metal rather than a semiconductor. Correct? So if this starts to behave more like a metal, then what does it mean? It clearly means that there will be a very less drop in this metal semiconductor junction, and if I apply a negative zero point 0.4 volt or something, all of this voltage will be reaching to this semiconductor over here. Correct? This is one of the reasons why whenever we want to take any contact from the body, right, we always dope it. So if this is P type, then we always dope it P plus, create an island over here, and then we take a metallic contact. If this was N type, then we would have an N plus contact, and then we would have done the metallic contact over here. Correct? I hope it is very clear how we are actually connecting the body of the MOSFET to the outside world by creating this P plus kind of island over here. Correct? This question that you are seeing, again we have solved it, right? Why the shape of the channel is not flat? What do I mean by that? So let's say this is one shape that I have. Correct? This is a complete rectangle. Correct? This is what we had imagined initially, how the channel will look like. But how actually the channel looks? So the channel looks something like this. It actually tapers off. Correct? So this is a question that generally is asked, why the channel thickness decreases as we move from source to drain. And we have already seen the reason, right? But Vs is 0 over here, Vd is equal to some positive value. Correct? The channel charge that I have, it is proportional to what? Vgs minus Vt minus the potential at any point in the channel. So if I take maybe x equal to x naught, then potential at this channel over here, right, it will decide how much channel charge will be present. And since as x increases, this is my direction of x, as x increases, even the channel potential will increase, because at this point the channel potential became like 1 volt. At this point the channel potential is 0. So the channel potential varies linearly between 0 and 1 volt. Correct? This is a first cut approximation that the channel voltage varies linearly, the channel potential. Correct? As the Vx increases, as you move from left to right side, the amount of channel charge that will be present below the oxide will also reduce. Correct? This is the main reason why the channel always tapers off as you move from left to right side. Okay, we have already seen this reason. Correct? So I hope all these questions are very much clear. If you have any doubts, please feel free to poke me at any point. Okay, so now what we will do, we will move on to few problems. First of all, we will start with the easy problems, and then there is one very important numerical on the subthreshold conduction that I actually want to cover. It will give you some idea regarding the functioning of the mobile phones also. Okay, so now let's start with this first question. First question, you guys will help me to solve this question. Okay, for an ideal p-type enhancement MOSFET. So what is a p-type enhancement MOSFET? So your substrate is actually n type. Your substrate is n type. Your source is p plus type. Your drain is p plus type. Correct? So this is your PMOS, right? This is your PMOS structure. Correct? Choose the correct statement. So first of all, tell me, just like in the case of NMOS, just like for the case of NMOS, if I talk about the inversion layer, it was made up of electrons. Correct? So similarly for PMOS, what will happen? The inversion layer will be made up of what? Electrons or holes? Holes, right? So it will be made up of holes. So first of all, we can reject those answers which tells us that the inversion layer will be created of electrons. Correct? So electron inversion layer not possible, electron inversion layer not possible, electron inversion layer not possible. Correct? So now one of you had also asked me this question, that the threshold voltage for PMOS is negative, right? Threshold voltage for PMOS is negative. correct? So what do we mean by that? Now if we want to create an inversion layer, the gate voltage has to be more negative than threshold voltage. Only then you will be able to form an inversion layer, correct? So that means what, if my let's say Vt is maybe around minus 0.8 volt, correct, then the gate voltage that I should apply, it should be at least, what you can say, maybe, how can I consider, maybe less than 0.8 volts, correct? Vg should be less than minus 0.8 volts, so it can be maybe minus 1.2 volt or something. So now if you compare these two numbers, right, if you compare these two numbers, what you will see that the magnitude of the Vg is higher than the magnitude of the Vt, because 1.2 volt is greater than 0.8 volt, correct? So this is the condition under which we are forming an inversion layer in the PMOS, correct? So now this is the condition that I have to look, correct? So Vg is equal to 0, inversion layer won't be forming. This answer is wrong, correct? If I operate under the Vg less than Vt, I am operating under depletion mode, correct? I am operating under the depletion mode. I still haven't formed the inversion layer, so even this answer is wrong. So only answer remaining is this much, and this answer is perfectly matching with the logic that we have applied, correct? So I hope this question is clear. Please feel free to poke me at any point, okay, if you are not able to understand anything. Now let's move on to the second question. So this is a very easy question. Given below are two statements regarding the current flowing in the PMOS and NMOS devices. Assume that the applied and the threshold voltages of both devices, that is NMOS and PMOS, have same magnitude and they have same W by L ratio. So let me write these conditions. W by L of PMOS is equal to W by L of NMOS, correct? So the VGS of NMOS, the magnitude of VGS of NMOS is equal to magnitude of VGS of PMOS that I am having. So also the threshold voltage of NMOS has been given as same as the threshold voltage of PMOS, correct? So from here I can write that VGS minus VT, correct, for NMOS, if I take the magnitude of this, is equal to the magnitude of VGS minus VT of PMOS, correct? So this is what I have deduced from the statement they have given in the question. So the statement 1 that they are claiming is that the drain current for a NMOS device will be higher than the drain current for the PMOS device for a particular VGS value, correct? So now this VGS, so I will select my condition because they have not given any region of operation. So I will select my condition. I will assume that they are operating in the saturation region, both of them, correct? I will assume that both of them are operating in the saturation region. So ID of NMOS, if I write, what it will be, mu n Cox W by L, correct, into half, then VGS minus VTH the whole square, correct? VGS minus VTH of NMOS, correct? And ID of PMOS will be what, half mu P Cox W by L VGS minus VTH mod, correct, the whole square for PMOS. By the way, this VGS is not there actually, it is actually VSG minus VTH is there, okay, correct? So VSG minus VTH the whole square. So now what they have given, let me just change the color of the pen, ink color maybe red. What they have given is that these two quantities are same, even these ratios W by L, even they are same, correct? So now if I divide this, if I divide equation number 1 with equation number 2, then ID of NMOS upon ID of PMOS will be what, mu n by mu p. Now a very simple question to you, what do you think which will be higher, ID of NMOS or ID of PMOS?
NMOS will be higher.
NMOS will be higher, very good, because the mobility of electrons is always higher than the mobility of holes for all the semiconductor structures that we have seen till now, correct? So since the mu n is higher than mu p, for a given size, if the size of the NMOS and PMOS both are same, then NMOS will give you at least twice as much current than the PMOS, correct? So first the statement 1 that they have mentioned that ID of NMOS will be greater than ID of PMOS, it is true, right? The reason they have given in the statement 2 is that the mobility of PMOS device is less than the mobility of NMOS device. Even the reason given is true, correct? So both the statements are correct, and the statement 2 is the correct explanation of the statement 1, correct? So this is the option that we have. Statement S1 is true, and S2 is also true, and S2 is the correct explanation of the statement number 1. Okay, I hope it is very much clear. So now we will move on to the next question, that is the problem number 3. Let me just see what is given in the problem number 3. So this has been taken from the Donald Niemann book. An N-channel silicon MOSFET has the following parameters. The width has been given, the length has been given, the oxide thickness has been also given, correct? When the transistor is biased in the saturation region, correct? When the transistor is biased in the saturation region, the drain current that we are getting is 0.132 milliamperes at a particular VGS value of 1 volt, correct? Now I am getting a different current of 0.295 milliampere in the saturation when I change the VGS value from 1 volt to 1.25 volt, correct? Now there are two questions that they are asking. The first question is determine the electron mobility, and the next question is they are asking me the threshold voltage value, correct? So now first of all, the first step always is to write the equation which relates all these terms, right? So we should first write the current equation in the saturation region, because it has been given that the MOSFET is operating in the saturation mode of operation. So half mu n Cox W by L VGS minus VTH the whole square, correct? So this is the equation that I have, correct? So now I need some help from you guys, okay? I need some help from you guys. Can you guys please at least tell me how should I approach this question? Let's imagine that this type of question has came in the GATE exam, and now you want to tackle this sort of question. So now what should be my approach? Two datas have been given to me. So what should I do over here to find the threshold voltage or to find the electron mobility? What should I do? How should I approach this question? Just think carefully. It is not that difficult. I'll just help you. See, mu n is unknown in this equation and VTH is unknown in this equation. Correct? Can I do something to find the VTH from the given data? What can I do? Just think carefully. It is not going to take a lot of time. Any hints? Even wrong answers are welcome. We can always go to the correct answer.
VG is greater than VT.
Yes, VGS is always greater than VTH. Correct? See, I don't want to get the answers in terms of inequalities, okay? I want to get to the finite answers. I want some finite exact answers for the mobility of electron and the threshold voltage. Okay, I will do one thing. For one set of data, I will just write the equation in front of you. Then you guys tell me what should I do, okay? 0.132 milliamperes is equal to half mu n is still unknown, correct? So Cox I will just write it as it is, correct? Then the W by L ratio has been given as what? 6 micrometer upon 1.5. So W by L will be what? 6 upon 1.5. So this is the value of 4, right? So I will just write 4 over here, and then when I am getting this current 0.132 milliampere, my gate source voltage is 1 volt, 1 minus VTH the whole square. So this is the first condition that I have. And now if I similarly write for the other data, 0.295 milliampere is equal to half mu n Cox, W by L will remain same, only the VGS value changed, right? Okay, so now I have given both the equations to you. Can you do something over here to find out the value of VTH? What can I do with this equation number 1 and 2? See, in one shot, I cannot solve for both the unknowns, right? The mu n and the VTH. I cannot solve for both the unknowns. I have to do something so that I can at least I can find the value of VTH easily. I have to do something with these equations. What should I do? Come on, guys. Anything is okay. Just at least try to give some answers. Will this help?
The division of 1 by 2.
Yeah, exactly. Very good. So now we have to divide both these equations. Now why did she say that? Because if we divide both these equations, then this mu and Cox will get cancelled out, and we will be left with only VTH over here. Correct? Then we will be able to find out the value of VTH, and once we know the value of VTH, we will be substituting that value in any one of this equation to find out the other unknown, that is mu n. Correct? So very good. Now let's try to solve these equations. Okay, so now divide 1 by 2. So this is what we will be following. Okay, 1 division by 2. So if I divide both of them, then what will I get? 0.132 divided by 0.295, because milliampere will get cancelled out, right? Then on the top I have what? 1 minus VTH the whole square, and on the bottom I have what? 1.25 minus VTH the whole square. Correct? Instead of solving the quadratic equation, it's better to take the square root on both the sides, right? Correct? So I will just take square root on both the sides. What I will be left with is 0.132 divided by 0.295 is equal to what? 1 minus VTH upon 1.25 minus VTH. Correct? Now if you cross multiply, right? If you cross multiply and solve for this value, then the value of VTH that you will be getting, it will be very close to 0.4948 volts. So this is the value of VTH that I got. Correct? Now let's say this is equation number 3. Correct? So now first of all, what we have to do? Substitute 3 in 1. But before doing that, the Cox value has not directly been given to me. Correct? The only thing that has been given is the thickness of the oxide. So I have to first find out the value of Cox. Cox prime is nothing but epsilon ox by Tox. Epsilon ox is what? 3.9 into permittivity of free space, that is 8.85 into 10 to the power minus 14. Thickness of oxide is 8 into 10 to the power minus 7. So the Cox prime, its value will come out to be around 4.314 into 10 to the power minus 7 farads per centimeter square. So this is the value of Cox that I got. Let me highlight it as equation number 4. Right? So now what we will do? Substitute 3 and 4 in 1. Correct? So what is the current that we had? 0.132 milliampere. Then we have what? Half into mu n. Cox I have already found out. 4.314 into 10 to the power minus 7. W by L is 4 into VGS. VGS was 1. See, in the equation number 1, the VGS was 1 over here. Correct? Then 1 minus VTH is 0.4948 square. The only thing unknown over here is the value of mu n. Correct? And if you do the some cross multiplication and the calculation, the value of mu n will come out to be around 599.428 centimeter square per volt second. Correct. So we were able to find both the answers, and thanks for the girl that gave me a hint of how to solve this equation. Okay. So guys, we will take a short break for 5 minutes. We will be back at 7:14 p.m. sharp. The break starts now. Yes. Okay, so now let's start with this next question that came in the GATE exam 2017, right? So wait a minute. Let me just attach my. Yeah. So now this question came in the GATE 2017. So now let's look at the question what they are actually asking. So an N-channel enhancement mode MOSFET is biased at VGS greater than VTH and VDS greater than VGS minus VTH. Correct? So what is this condition? This is the saturation mode of operation. Correct? And correct. So VDS and VGS, they have denoted the notations what they are, and VTH is threshold voltage. So considering the channel length modulation effect to be significant, right? To be significant, the MOSFET behaves as. So now we have seen those curves, right? We have seen the curve. What curve I'm talking about? IDS, ID versus VDS. So we saw some curve like this. Correct? After a certain point, if I talk about this point, right? This is my VGS minus VT value equal to VDS. After this point, you guys only told me that dou ID by dou VDS is 0. Correct? Dou ID by dou VDS is 0 over here. That means the ID is not dependent on the value of VDS. But when was this valid? This is valid for the long channel MOSFETs. Long channel MOSFETs. So what are the values of the long channel MOSFET? So what is the channel length value? So normally if my length is approximately around 1 micrometer or greater than 1 micrometer, then all those MOSFETs I will consider as a long channel MOSFETs. And in those long channel MOSFETs, you will see a graph like this, correct? But when the MOSFET channel length reduces, see this 1 micrometer means around 1000 nanometer, correct? L should be greater than 1000 nanometer. What is the current technology node at which TSMC is fabricating the processors for the Apple? So that is around 3 nanometer. Correct? Just imagine the kind of scaling that we have. Okay, somebody wants to join. Just give me a second. Yeah. So now just imagine the kind of shrinkage in the channel length that we were able to achieve in the past few decades, right? So now what happens when for the small channel MOSFET? So this length, this region that you are seeing over here, it won't remain flat. There will be some kind of slope that will be present. That means ID will keep on increasing. ID will keep on increasing with VDS. Correct? It won't saturate at certain point. Correct? This happens in the short channel MOSFETs, and this phenomena will be completely explained to you under the topic called as channel length modulation. So we'll cover this in the next week. Okay, so this will be completely explained to you under the phenomena channel length modulation. Correct? Now why I have brought this over here? Because we don't have to understand the channel length modulation completely to solve this question. Okay, now I will just give you one task. So just tell me this: if I want to design an ideal current source, right? Ideal current source, you always know that there exists some kind of parallel resistance with this current source. And if I want to design a voltage source, correct? If I want to design some kind of voltage source, then there exists a series resistance always with this voltage source in series, correct? Now if I want to make this as an ideal current source, what should be the value of R? What should be the value of R? This is the internal resistance of this current source only. Should this be 0 or should this be infinity? Of very basic electrical networks. R should be 0 or sorry?
0.
Okay, let's try to understand this. If I make R is equal to 0, right? So I want to put this current source, right? Let's say this is my internal source resistance. I want this current source to deliver this current to some kind of load over here. Okay, to some kind of load. This is my RL, right? Now, if I make R is equal to 0, right? Then this will become what? This will become short circuit. If this became a short circuit, and then there is a load resistor to which I want my current to be delivered. Correct? This is I naught. Now, can you tell me from where this I naught will flow? From here or here?
From short circuit.
From short circuit line. So, do you think R is equal to 0 will work in this case?
No.
No, right? So, R should be infinity. When R is equal to infinity, only then this entire current will actually flow through this RL, because this will act like an open circuit because of the infinite resistance of the current source. Correct? So R should be infinity over here. Correct? So this is for the ideal current source. Now what we are seeing over here is that dou ID by dou VDS was 0 initially. Correct? But now it is increasing linearly. So now if I write dou ID by dou VDS over here, if you consider this region, right, this region where it is increasing, dou ID by dou VDS is not 0, and since we are assuming that this is a linear, this is a very good model, we can approximate this as a linear increase. Correct? If it is increasing linearly, then the derivative of ID with respect to VDS of a linear function will come out to be a constant value, maybe k. Correct? It will act like a k. Now, if I just, what you can say, I just integrate on both the sides, correct? ID and VDS is there. So, or I can write it like this also. The delta ID is equal to constant times delta VDS. Correct? Now, delta VDS upon delta ID will be what? 1 upon K. Now, what is this delta VDS by delta ID? According to Ohm's law, it is nothing but a resistance, because the current between the two terminals is being controlled by the voltage applied between the same two terminals, that is drain and source. Correct? So now this is how we define the resistance. So the resistance will be 1 upon K. And what is this K? So the K is nothing but the slope of the ID versus VDS curve. So now what we can see over here, when dou ID by dou VDS was 0, when this condition was being satisfied for the long channel MOSFET, correct? If I had modeled, let me just pull up that slide, that will be much better. Where is the slide? Yeah, this slide, just a minute. Yeah. So if you consider this slide, what did I write over here? In the saturation case, it behaves as a voltage controlled current source. Voltage controlled current source means voltage is controlled by the VGS over here. Correct? So now dou ID by dou VDS was 0. Correct? That means what? That means what? R is equal to infinity. So this was for the case of long channel MOSFET. Now what did I get? So in the question that I have, I got the value of dou ID by dou VDS to be some finite value. Correct? So I will just make the model. I will just make the model for ideal case and non-ideal case. You will easily understand what I am talking about. So for the ideal case, the MOSFET behaves as a current source under the saturation region. Correct? And I had R is equal to infinity over here. Correct? But now for the case of non-ideal that is given in the question, even though I have the current source over here, this R is not infinity. This R is 1 upon K. That is the 1 upon the slope of the dou ID, ID by VDS curve. Correct? So now the model which the constant, the voltage controlled current source model for the ideal case was looking like this. Now for the non-ideal case, it became something like this, right? So what is this model? This model is nothing but a current source which is having some finite output impedance, correct? Which is having some finite output impedance. And if my K is equal to 0, my non-ideal model will be equal to my ideal model, correct? My R will again become infinity. So K is equal to 0 means slope is equal to 0, and slope is equal to 0 means ID constant with respect to VDS. correct? So my model is nothing but a current source with finite output impedance, and that is what they are asking me in the question. Just a minute. Yeah, that is what they are asking me in the question, whether it behaves as a voltage source or whether it behaves as a current source. So voltage source is not at all in a question, because we saw that it behaves as a current source, and it is not with infinite output impedance because we are not ignoring the channel length modulation effect, which created the slope in this ID versus VDS curve. I hope the question is very much clear. So that's why we are left with only this option. It is acting like a current source with finite output impedance. And what is that impedance? 1 upon slope of the curve. Right? This slope I am talking about. Not like this. Uh, yeah. Yeah, this slope I am talking about. Okay. So I hope the question was clear. Any doubts, please ask me to, please feel free to poke me at any point. Okay. So now this question I will leave as a homework to you guys. This is not at all a difficult problem. Correct? This is not at all a difficult. Why did I say that? We just have to apply the formula, because they are just asking the value of ID set, and you know what is the value of ID set. It is just half mu n Cox W by L VGS minus VTH the whole square. Everything is given in the question. You can just substitute everything and just get the value of ID set. It is not at all a difficult question. Okay. So now before moving on to the substrate bias effect, I will cover the subthreshold slope first, because I have a very important question to cover from that concept. So now we saw towards the end of this week, sir told us about something called as the subthreshold conduction. So now what is this subthreshold conduction? So now let's try to actually understand it. So in one of the maybe 1 or 2 weeks back, someone of you had asked me this question, that okay, if I have my, let's say in the MOSFET, if I give my VG greater than the threshold voltage, then I know I form the inversion layer, right? But what happens when I operate under the depletion mode? What happens when I operate under the depletion mode? So I answered that there still, for example, if I just take a structure of the MOSFET, right? The way I had answered this question was, there will be still some electrons. If this is a p-type substrate, correct, some electrons have already been accumulated. These are minority carriers, so some kind of what you can say, I cannot say it like a inversion layer, because inversion layer means this region that you are seeing, it should become n-type. There are not enough number of electrons for this region to become n-type, but still some electrons are there. Now if I take this MOSFET, if I take such a MOSFET and create a MOSFET out of it, n plus, right? Then this is what? This is my oxide, this is my gate, correct? And I have some electrons, very small number of electrons still that are present, correct? So now a question to you guys, if I apply Vs is equal to 0, and if I apply some Vd is equal to, let's say, some value, maybe 0.5 volts, correct? What do you think will happen? Some electrons already exist over here. What do you think? What will happen to these electrons? They will stay there, or they will experience the electric field and they will move somewhere? They will move. Very good. Yeah, very good. So they will move to the drain side, right? So in a very ideal case, if I assume the ideal model, right? So what we assume that there does not exist sufficient number of electrons to give us any current. But if you measure any practical device for this particular range of voltages, that is Vg greater than Vg less than Vt, but Vg greater than 0, correct? So you will see that because of the small number of electrons that have accumulated near the source, near the oxide semiconductor interface, if you apply a electric field because of the potential difference between drain and source, those electrons will move towards the drain and you will get some current actually. Now you also know that n naught, once I have reached the depletion, and so what happens? So see, I'm trying to create a depletion region over here, and I'm trying to get these electrons, as many electrons as possible. You also know that if I increase my Vg by delta Vg, correct, these electrons that you are seeing, they will increase exponentially. The number of electrons will increase exponentially, due to small change in the gate voltage, right? So you also know that this is the case when I am operating under the depletion mode, okay, for the MOSFET case. So because of the movement of this electron, I expect some kind of current, and I also expect some kind of exponential behavior because I have not hit the inversion mark yet. Correct? Any change, any positive Vg that I apply will attract what you can say the electrons, will attract those main electrons which will satisfy the charge neutrality condition. That is, positive over here should be equally balanced by the negative charges over here. It can come from the depletion also, it can come from the these free carriers also over here. Correct? So you expect some kind of exponential behavior, and you also expect some kind of current even when my Vg is less than Vt. So that current, when you get when your Vg is actually less than Vt, ideally your MOSFET should have given you a zero current, but the practical MOSFET won't give you that. That current is called as the sub-threshold current. Why the name sub-threshold? Sub-threshold means you are operating before that before you reach that threshold condition, right? So the current that you get in this particular condition is called as your sub-threshold current. Correct? So if you look at the energy band diagram, right? If you look at the energy band diagram, this energy band diagram is for what? It is for that MOS structure that I was telling you about. So if you take the let me just change the color of the pen. Actually, this is a little bit confusing. Just hold on with me for a few minutes. In color, this is green. Yeah. So now there are two energy band diagrams that you will see in the books. One energy band diagram is drawn across this cross section. What is present across this cross section? So if I just do it like this, I have a metal, I have oxide, I have a semiconductor. That is, this channel will also be present over here. Correct? So this diagram has been drawn for this particular case. There is one more way I can draw the energy band diagram, that is along this particular cross section. What is present? I have source over here, I have channel that is present over here, I have drain that is present over here. Correct? So both the diagrams are correct. You should always look across what cross section that energy band diagram has been drawn. Correct? So for this particular case, it has been drawn across this MOS cross section, that is this vertical cross section. Correct? What you are seeing over here is that this amount of this bending that has happened, the same bending is not replicated over here. If it would have been replicated over here, then the condition of inversion would have reached, because that clearly means that my substrate, the quantity with which my substrate is p-type in the bulk, the same on the opposite side has happened. That means near the oxide semiconductor interface, my substrate has become as much n-type that it was p-type in the bulk. Correct? That has not happened over here, so that's why we are still operating under the depletion mode case. I hope the origination of the sub-threshold current is very much clear. Correct? And so this is the diagram that I was talking about. This diagram has been drawn across this cross section. This is my source, this is my drain, and this is my channel. So do not get confused. Even interviewer will confuse you when you try to give interviews in the industry, or maybe MTech or PhD admissions, right? So they will confuse you that draw the energy band diagram. So first you should ask, across what cross section do you want me to draw? Okay. So now if I look at this particular cross section, so now let's look. So what they have given over here. So B is nothing but the case of accumulation. For my NMOS, the case of accumulation means Vg is equal to negative. The energy band diagram, any energy band diagram, does not matter any cross section, it is always drawn with respect to energy of electron. What is the energy of electron? E is nothing but minus QV. E is nothing but minus QV. If I am applying a negative voltage, that means this energy that you are seeing over here, this will be a positive quantity. That's why you are seeing that this energy is above the value 0. This dashed line is of 0. Okay, so that's why this E is above 0. Now on the source side, correct, you have, it is very near to the VBI. And why do you think why this is near to the VBI? Of course, we have not done anything. This is under accumulation. We have not even formed the inversion layer. Correct? So if we have not even formed the inversion layer, that means the electrons from here cannot move to this particular side, because we don't have any continuous channel. So how can we represent this in the energy band diagram? it is represented as it is, as if these electrons are facing some kind of a potential barrier when they are trying to move from the source region into the channel region. When the electron from the source region want to move into the channel region, it is facing this potential barrier. It is facing this potential barrier. Correct? I hope that is very much clear to you. And now what is this VBI? This VBI is nothing but the built-in potential that exists in the depletion region that has been created because of the P and N plus junction. Correct? I hope why there is a barrier. I hope it is very much clear. Correct? Similarly, on the drain side, now why drain side is at a lower level compared to source? Because VDS is positive. It is some positive value. My source was 0 over here. E is nothing but minus QV. The more positive voltage you apply on the drain side, the lower it will move with respect to source. Correct? Correct? So I hope that is very much clear why the drain is at the lower side. Now what happens when you apply Vg is equal to positive? When you apply Vg is equal to positive voltage, right? Then that means C is equal to minus QV, right? So energy band diagram will, for that particular channel over here, it will shift down, right? So the value that you were seeing over here, it is some positive value. Now after applying the positive voltage, it became negative, below 0. Correct? So I hope it is clear why it is shifting down. Now another way to think about it is that we are creating a depletion region and we are on the verge of forming the channel. If we are on the verge of forming the channel, the electrons from the source can easily move through the channel to the drain. That means the potential, the barrier that the electrons will face for moving from the source to the channel, it has been lowered now. Correct? This barrier that you are seeing over here, let me highlight it as maybe A1 and let me highlight this as A0. You can clearly see that A1 has decreased with respect to A0. Correct? And I hope I have also given you an intuition why this should also happen. Now what happens in the case of inversion? This barrier will further reduce up to such a low value that most of the electrons from the source will directly jump onto the channel and then they will go and move towards the drain side. Correct? And why they are not facing any resistance while moving into the drain region? Because drain is at a lower potential level. It has lower energy. So electrons from higher energy level will always want to move into the lower energy level. So whatever electrons will reach over here, they will actually move directly into this drain because it is operating at a lower energy level. Correct? One confusion that may have arisen in your mind, that if the electrons come over here, then in the N plus region there already exists a lot of electrons. So why would electron want to go from the channel into the drain region? Correct? This is the reason why this can happen. Because the drain is at a lower energy level compared to the channel. It is at a lower energy level. I hope it is very much clear why the subthreshold current conduction occurs. We have seen the energy band diagrams from the two cross sections, that is this MOS cross section, MOS, and another cross section is source, channel and drain. I hope there will not be any doubt now. If you have any doubts, please feel free to poke me at any point. So now this is, I have just taken this screenshot from the lecture material. This is just to show you the importance of the subthreshold slope. So now we defined one thing called as subthreshold slope or subthreshold swing. So now what is this subthreshold swing? See, what I want is, ideally I want the characteristics of the MOSFET to look something like this. Correct? Beyond Vt, the current should always be 0. This is what I want ideally, but that will never happen in the practical device. Correct? What you will get is, you will see some kind of current that will be flowing up. It won't be 0 actually, and it will, after Vt, it will increase from over here. Correct? So now one question to me, one question to you guys. If below Vt I want Id to be 0, correct, on the left side, and on the right side I want Id to be some finite positive value. Correct? What does this mean? If I change my VGS a little bit by delta V, if I change my VGS by delta V, correct, my ID should go from positive to 0 value. Should go from positive to 0 value immediately. Immediately, correct? So now if I take dou ID, right? If I take this dou ID by maybe dou Vd, correct? Dou Vg, sorry, dou Id by dou Vg. If I take it like this, then what I will get is a very large value. Or this is what I desire, correct? This is what I desire because I want to make MOSFET as ideal as possible. What is the characteristics of the ideal MOSFET? Below Vt, ID should be 0, and after Vt, I should immediately get some rise in the current, right? Within a fraction of delta, my ID should actually vary from the value of 0 to some finite positive value, correct? So the slope that I want is maybe from value of 0 to some maybe hundreds of microamperes. This is the change that I want, and ideally I want this change to be very large. A small change in Vg should produce a large change in ID, but that never happens in the practical device, correct? So the reason I just took this slide over here, it is just to prove it to you that the higher the sub threshold swing, better is the MOSFET. Higher the sub threshold swing, better is the MOSFET. Why did I say that? Because this is the characteristics of the ideal MOSFET. A small change in Vg around the Vt point should produce a large change in the current, correct? So this is what I have defined as a sub threshold swing. For the practical MOSFETs that you will see over here, you will get many, like you will get some question also, maybe in different books. They will ask you to compare the sub threshold slopes, and they will ask you which MOSFET will turn off better. So the MOSFET which is having a higher sub threshold swing, right? MOSFET which is having a higher sub threshold swing will turn off better. Will turn off better. So always remember this point, okay? I want my MOSFET to have as high sub threshold swing as possible, correct? So these diagrams that you are seeing over here, which has been taken from the lecture material, it also explains the same thing. And the typical sub threshold swing that you will be able to observe in the MOSFET is around 60 millivolt per decade. Now what does this unit actually tells you? A 60 millivolt change in the value of VGS will actually change the current by the factor 10x. A small change in the VGS of 60 millivolt will actually drastically change the current by 10x. So this is the meaning of the sub-threshold slope. Okay, so now in the interview, many of my colleagues were also asked like which device is actually better, whether it is a device with higher sub-threshold slope or lower sub-threshold slope. So we have clearly seen that the device with higher sub-threshold slope is always better. It will turn off better compared to a device which is having a lower sub-threshold slope, and we have also seen the reason. So I hope this question is also very much clear. Now comes to the here we come to the most important question of this today's lecture, that is this problem number 8. It has been taken from the unsolved exercise of the Donald Niemann. So now let us see what this problem is asking us. Assume the sub-threshold current of the MOSFET is given by ID is equal to 10 to the power minus 15 exponential of VGS upon 2.1 times VT, correct? So don't worry too much about this, from where this 2.1 factor came up, right? It is just taking into account some interface states that will actually occur. So what are these interface states? You just a minute. Yeah, so you know that there is a silicon to silicon oxide interface that is present in the MOSFET. So this interface may not be completely pure. There may be some impurities. So there will be, if you read books, you will see that there are something called as dangling bonds that are present across this interface, right? So they cause a lot of problem. They don't allow the very smooth movement of electrons across the channel. So to account for that, they have taken this factor into account. Okay, assume that 10 to the power 6 identical transistors on a chip are all biased at the same VGS value and the VDD is equal to 5 volt. So now the first question they are asking me is calculate the total current that must be supplied to the chip at VGS is equal to 0.5 to 0.7 and 0.9 volt. The chip means the integrated circuit chip, the silicon chip. And the question B is calculate the total power dissipated in the chip for the same VGS values. Okay, so now I will just draw a rough diagram for you guys to understand it better. This is my VD, correct? This is my VD, and let's say I have a PMOS let's say not like this. Let's say I have NMOS transistors. Okay, I have NMOS transistors like this. I can keep on going like this till the point I reach my last transistor, right? What is this last transistor? This is 10 to the power 6th transistor, right? This is first, this is second, and this is 10 to the power 6th transistor. The VGS of all of them, right? The VGS is same for both, for all of them, and the VGS value is what? In the first case it is 0.5, then 0.7, and then 0.9. So for 0.9 this will be left as a homework to you. 0.5 and 0.7 I will solve in front of you. Okay, so now what they are asking, if I have a semiconductor chip like this, so maybe this is my silicon wafer, right? I do the dicing and all, so in each of these slots one chip will be present. So one of this chip will be looking like this. If I just take it like this, then if you zoom into this, right, then this chip you will be able to see something like this. Now what they are asking me is, if I take a battery of 5 volts, if I take a battery of the 5 volts, and if I supply it to this chip, if I apply this across the chip which consists of 10 to the power 6 transistors, correct? So they are asking me to actually calculate the current that will be consumed by this chip, that is the value of ID when the VGS voltage across all these 10 to the power 6 transistors is 0.5, 0.7 and 0.9 volts. I hope the question is very much clear to you. So now what we will do, we will first solve for VGS is equal to 0.5 volts. Okay, let me just write it. Yeah. So my VGS is what? 0.5 volts. So now what is my equation? ID is what? ID is 10 to the power minus 15 into exponential of VGS. So VGS is 0.5. The factor of 2.1 is there. Correct? And they have not given the temperature. So this VT, I am assuming the temperature as 300 Kelvin. So this VT will be what? It is KT by Q, right? It is around what? 0.0259. That is approximately 26 millivolts. So this is the value that I will be using into 0.0259. So now if you just calculate this value of ID, it will come out to be around 9.826 picoamperes. Correct? This at what? At VGS is equal to 0.5 volt. This value has been calculated for single transistor. Single transistor, right? Now similarly, if I write, just a minute, if I write VGS is equal to 0.7 volts, my ID will be what? Let me just highlight it. Yeah, 10 to the power minus 15 exponential of 0.7 upon 2.1 into 0.0259. So if you calculate this value, then this value will come out to be around 3.885 into 10 to the power minus 10 amperes, correct, at VGS is equal to 0.7 volts. So now again this value has been calculated for single transistor. Single transistor. Now if I want to calculate the total ID, if I write ID total at VGS is equal to 0.5 volt, then what this will be? There are total 10 to the power 6 transistors with the same gate to source voltage that I have been applying into this 9.826 picoampere. Pico means 10 to the power minus 12 ampere, right? So this current will come out to be around 9.826 microamperes. Let me highlight this as equation number 1. Similarly, if I calculate ID total for VGS equal to 0.7 volts, then what it will come out to be 3.885 into 10 to the power minus 10 into total of 10 to the power 6 transistors. Now this will come out to be 0.388 milliampere. Are you seeing the magnitude of difference that occurred over here? These are your sub-threshold currents. They should not have been there ideally, but because your device is not ideal, these currents are actually present in your device. Okay, so now what we have done, just give me a second. Yeah, so what we have done till now, we have solved the question, the first part of the question, that is question number A. The question number A, correct? Now we will move on to the part number B. The part number B is asking calculate the total power dissipated in the chip for the same VGS values. Now, how can I calculate the power dissipated in the chip? So, can anyone please look into this circuit? This is a circuit that I'm talking about. The 5-volt battery, ID current flowing through the chip, and this is the chip that I have. Correct? So now, can anyone please tell me how can I calculate the power dissipated in the chip? How can I calculate the power dissipated in the chip? A very simple electrical networks question. In terms of voltage and current, what is the formula for power? V into I, very good. So the power dissipated, if I look over here, then this is nothing but VDD into ID. Because VDD is the supply that I'm giving to the chip, and ID is the total current that is consumed by all the transistors. Right? So VDD into ID is the formula. So let me just write. So power dissipated is equal to what? VDD into ID. Just a minute. Yeah, power dissipated is VDD into ID. So now for the case 1, when VGS is equal to 0.5 volts, right? So if I calculate power dissipated, VD is my phi, and what is the ID total that I got? So the total ID that I got is 9.826 microamperes, right? 9.826 microampere. So this will come out to be around 49.134 microwatts. This is the power consumed by your chip when it is actually operating in the subthreshold region, and when I am operating under the case 2, that is VGS is equal to 0.7 volts, my power dissipated will be again VDD is phi, and the ID total that I have is around 0.388 milliamperes. So the total power dissipated over here is around 1.94 milliwatts. Okay, so we have solved the question. So what was so big in this question? So now just imagine you have a mobile with you. You have a lithium ion battery. Correct? Let me just highlight it as battery. You have lithium ion battery, and now you are supplying one chip. There is just this one chip in your mobile. I'm not drawing other chips, right? This chip that is present in your mobile. Correct? This is the VSS end, and this is the VDD end of the chip. Correct? Now in the subthreshold current, when you actually don't want anything to happen, you don't want anything to happen in the subthreshold case ideally, but practically we have seen that this is the power level that is getting consumed when your device is operating at some finite voltage which may be less than VT. Correct? So now if this VGS of these transistors have not been turned off well, if those VGS remain like 0.5 or 0.7, you can see that even when your chip sits idle, it is actually consuming around 1.94 milliwatt of power all the time. All the time it will be consuming this much power if you don't do anything. I just took an example of 10 to the power 6 transistors in this question. If you look at the latest Apple processor, right, maybe A14 or maybe A13 or something like that, it will easily have more than 11 billion transistors. It will easily have more than 11 billion transistors. Now if I multiply this factor by maybe 10 to the power 3, can you see the harsh consequence that this chip will give to your mobile? It will just consume around 1.94 watt of power. It is not doing any operation. We are just in the subthreshold region. Correct? This actually tells us that how subthreshold current, even though it seems very minuscule, the microampere current and all, it is seeming minuscule, how it can cause a disaster if the transistors are not turned off properly, especially in the case when you are talking about a processor chip or something like that. Correct? And this is one of the main reasons you will see that the chip that I have drawn, it is just consisting of NMOS transistors, right? Sir has also taught you CMOS technology. What is CMOS technology? In the last slide of the lecture material, I saw this slide, right? You always operate, you always have this kind of topology, right? You give some voltage like this, correct? So when one of the NMOS, if this is turned on, then other MOSFET is turned off. And when PMOS is turned on, NMOS will be turned off. So what will happen? There won't be any current flow between VDD and ground. In static case, what do I mean by static case? When you have fixed the voltage, when you have fixed the DC voltage over here, correct? So that's why you can see the most of the processors will always be operating in this CMOS fashion, correct? Of course, now if you look at the latest Apple processor A14, it is made up of 3 nanometer FinFET process. I don't want to go into the details of the FinFET, but I'm just telling you the importance of the CMOS technology. If you don't have a structure like this, just see the disastrous consequences that you will occur when you have 11 billion transistors in your chip. They are only NMOS transistors. You will, when your chip is sitting idle, it will consume around 1.94 watt of power. Just imagine the consequence, how quickly your battery will drain, right? So this is one of the main reasons that I wanted to take this problem, like, because this problem is very much practical and it helps you to understand the dire consequences of the having the sub threshold slope, and especially in the case of the processor chips. Also at the same point, it highlights the importance of the CMOS technology. Okay, so now this was the CMOS technology that I was talking about. This has again been taken from the lecture slides. So what you can see over here, on one side you will have a PMOS structure and on one side you have an NMOS structure, right? So now there are these two arrangements that have been shown over here. Like normally you can start with the N substrate, you fabricate your PMOS structure over here, right? Then you create a P well for fabricating a NMOS, right? And on the other side you can start with the P substrate, make your NMOS structure first, and then create a N well, and then create a PMOS structure over here. Now a very common interview question that is normally asked on this topic is, in many cases, in many technologies, you will see that we always prefer this kind of arrangement. Now they will ask you the reason for same. So one of the primary reasons for this is, you know that mu n is greater than mu p, correct? If mu n is greater than mu p, then my NMOS devices can switch faster. They can give me good gain compared to PMOS devices of the same size, right? So normally if you see any high speed amplifier and let's say power amplifier or low noise amplifier, you will always see that most of them are made up of NMOS, correct? This is one of the main primary reason. They give you good gain for the same size. If you compare it with PMOS, also they can switch a lot faster. So the focus of the technology process, the process should be to make a very good NMOS device. Now what is happening over here, let's say I dope N substrate with 10 to the power 15 doping, and now I have to create a P well. Now how this P well will be created? See, the concentration, the acceptor impurity concentration that I have, it should be greater than the ND, the background N substrate concentration that I have over here. This is a case of compensation doping. I hope you remember this. In one of when we discussed this, I told you this is of very importance to Foundry. It is not a concept that has been made to trouble you for asking the questions, right? This is of very importance, and you can see how the compensation doping will come over here, correct? So your Na has to be greater than Nd. So what does this mean? If the N substrate doping is 10 to the power 15, at least the P well doping I should at least have 10 to the power 16, correct? Now in this P substrate case, if I have the 10 to the power 15 doping, my NMOS can still work with this doping, right? The 10 to the power 15. So now you can see over here that I was able to create my NMOS transistor with just 10 to the power 15 doping for the P type substrate, Whereas if I start with the n-type substrate, my concentration over here actually increased to 10 to the power 16. Correct? Now what does this mean? If the, I already told you like why we lightly dope p-type material. When you are talking about NMOS, we have seen this question, right? Why the p-type material is lightly doped? So we have seen two reasons. One is the threshold voltage, and the second reason is the mobility. If you dope the p-type material heavily, then what will happen? The when electron wants to travel between the source and drain, it will see a lot of immobile boron atoms in between, with which it will keep on colliding, and after collision only it will reach the drain. But if these boron atoms, instead of having 3 or 4 boron atoms over here, if I just have one of them, right, this electron will just have a one collision and then it will directly reach the drain. Correct? So electron can move very smoothly over here, whereas it is facing a lot of obstacles over here. So that's why you can see we always, most of the foundries will always start with the p-type substrate, and then we create NMOS over here, and then we create a n-well over here, and then we fabricate PMOS structures over here. Right? This is one of the main reasons why we have the p-type substrate over here, why we don't start with the n-type substrate. Correct? I hope the answer to this question is very much clear and you won't get confused at all. So this was the last slide for today. We are exactly at 8 p.m. If you guys have any doubts, then please feel free to poke me, or else we will close the session in 2 or 3 minutes. Any doubts till this point? Guys, were you at least able to understand those conceptual questions which I talked about? This question, the p-type substrate, as well as the interview questions that we discussed. Okay, great. Okay, last call for doubts. Any doubts? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, the channel is the channel near the drain end is not there actually. Yeah. Correct. Okay, so okay, I will just go in that slide. Just give me a minute. Okay, just a minute. Yeah. So if you look over here, the electric field is actually from the right to left. Electric field is actually from right to left. So if you look, the electrons will be pulled from left to right direction only. So the way where the electrons will be pulling, it is in the same way. When the channel was present, electrons were moving from source to drain. The electric field is also in such a direction that it pulls the electron from left to right side. So the direction of the current is same only. That is from drain to source. Okay. Guys, any more doubts? And ma'am, do you want the reason why the electric field is in this particular direction, or you got this? Yeah. Yes, very good, very good. Yes. So you have to go into the look into the depletion region over here, and you will see that the depletion region will be forming something like this. On the n plus side, you will have this positive, and on the p side, you will have this immobile negative immobile atoms. So the electric field direction in the depletion region will look like this. I hope you got this. Okay, great. Okay, guys, thanks a lot for staying here for 2 hours. Have a great evening ahead and have a great weekend. Take care. Bye bye.